the deification of Amenhotep III during his lifetime, the elevation of Amenhotep III to divine status during his reign, closely tied to his first Jubilee celebration in 1361 BC, marked a significant departure for Egyptian kingship. While previous pharaohs had hinted at divinity, often portraying themselves with divine traits, there had always been a fine but deliberate separation between the king as Horus on earth and Horus himself, between being the chosen of Ra and Ra as the one who chose, between a monarch as Nefer, perfected or junior god, and the true gods. No ruler before Amenhotep III had so boldly and openly declared himself a living god, fully merging with the creator deity. This transformation is most clearly seen in distant Nubia, at the far southern boundary of Egypt's 18th dynasty power. Among Amenhotep's numerous construction projects was the establishment of a new temple inside the fortress of Kemet, present-day Salab, intended to secure Egyptian Nubia against the territories beyond. Reflecting his solar aspirations, the temple was situated on the west bank of the Nile, facing the sunrise. Initially, the temple served as a small shrine for Ammonius, the king's personal protector. However, it was later expanded with 2 solar courtyards and a columned hall filled with statues. Around the time Amenhotep reached his 30th regnal year, the temple's dedication was modified to honor both Ammonius Ra of Ipitsut residing in the fortress of Kemet and Nebmatra, Amenhotep III's throne name, Lord of Nubia. The union of Ammonius Ra, king of the gods, with Amenhotep III, the god king, formed a fitting divine pair. Reliefs at Kemet's temple also document aspects of the king's first jubilee. The ancient Sed festival, focused on renewal and rejuvenation, held particular significance for Amenhotep. He appears to have begun preparations well in advance. The construction of solar courtyards at his principal temples in both Egypt and Nubia likely anticipated this jubilee, symbolizing his ultimate unification with the sun god. In organizing the festival, every effort was made to ensure it surpassed all previous jubilees. Scholars were commissioned to consult ancient records and rediscover past practices. Among their findings was a ceremonial palette over 15 centuries old, dating back to the dawn of Egypt's history, bearing a simplified depiction of jubilee rites. Though limited, this revered artifact contributed valuable insights to their preparations. Given Thebes' central role in Amenhotep's religious innovations, it was appropriate that his jubilee ceremonies take place there. True to his grand style, the king ordered the construction of an entirely new ceremonial city. This new complex arose on the west bank of the Nile, south of his mortuary temple and directly across from Luxor Temple, the symbolic site of his rebirth. In its initial phase, the complex, modestly called Palace of the Dazzling Orb and the House of Rejoicing, modern Malkata, stretched nearly a mile. The city featured an administrative quarter with spacious villas for officials, a secondary palace, and the king's main residence. The lavish audience halls boasted floors adorned with brightly colored textiles and ceilings decorated with exotic Minoan designs. Amenhotep's bedroom ceiling was painted with soaring vultures interspersed with his royal titles. Tables veneered with ebony and inlaid with gold displayed elegant ointment jars and intricately crafted perfume bottles made of multicolored glass. Such glassware was so prized by the king and queen that a dedicated workshop was established near the palace to meet the high demand. Amenhotep's patronage of glassmaking has often been likened to Louis XIV's support for Sèvres porcelain. Amenhotep's ceremonial city and mortuary temple were linked by an elevated causeway, which extended southward for another mile and a half, ending at a secluded desert location, modern Qom el-Semak. There, following ancient tradition, the king sat enthroned on a raised platform with twin stairways, symbolizing his rule over both Upper and Lower Egypt. Beyond this site, unfinished royal structures dotted the remote Theban hills, though the full extent of Amenhotep's plans remains a matter of speculation. The imagination of the king and his advisors appeared limitless. The dazzling orb of all lands envisioned one final dramatic spectacle to crown his grand festival of kingship, A ceremonial city and an extravagant palace nestled within a sacred landscape were not enough for the ultimate jubilee. Recalling the rowing lake he had gifted to Queen Tai 2 decades earlier, Amenhotep conceived a new, unprecedented project. He ordered the creation of 2 colossal artificial harbors, matching in scale anything he had previously attempted. Each harbor stretched nearly half a mile in length and a quarter-mile in width. The massive volume of earth excavated from the western basin was redistributed across the nearby plains, forming an artificial platform on which the Jubilee City would rise. Today, the western harbor, Birket Habu, remains visible as a depression marked by mounds of spoil, its true size only apparent from an aerial perspective. The eastern harbor has since vanished beneath modern Luxor, though it was still recognizable when Napoleon visited Egypt, and he likely would have admired its original purpose. Amenhotep's vision was to stage the most awe-inspiring setting imaginable for the heart of his Jubilee ceremony. On the morning of the main celebration, courtiers, high officials, royal companions, and distinguished guests gathered inside the palace. There, the king bestowed lavish gifts upon them: golden necklaces, ornaments shaped like ducks and fish, and special jubilee ribbons made of green linen. The guests then enjoyed a grand breakfast banquet alongside the king before being led to the artificial harbors. What followed was a breathtaking display of royal authority and divine kingship. At the water's edge, Amenhotep III and Queen Tai appeared, resplendent in gold from head to toe, shining like the sun itself. At the eastern harbor, they boarded a replica of the sun god's morning bark. As a ritual reenactment of the sun's daily journey into the sky, the assembled courtiers took up the ropes and gently pulled the vessel forward, symbolically towing the sun god into the heavens at dawn. The procession then moved to the western harbor, where the king and queen reappeared, this time aboard a replica of the sun god's evening bark. Once again, dignitaries pulled the ropes, now portraying the sun's descent into the underworld at dusk. The spectacle was so magnificent that the master of ceremonies could later boast that, since the time of the ancestors, no generations had celebrated such jubilee rites. Amenhotep III would go on to celebrate a second and third jubilee, each accompanied by new monumental constructions and elaborate ceremonies. Then, unexpectedly, in 1353 BC, he died, still in his late 40s. His sudden death must have deeply shaken a population steeped in royal propaganda and a court that believed in the king's immortality. Yet no one could have anticipated the revolutionary upheaval that awaited Egypt under Amenhotep's successor. The brilliant sun of Egypt had set. When it rose again, it would blaze with a harsh, unyielding intensity. In the chronicles of ancient Egypt, no figure has sparked more debate and fascination than one particular ruler. He inspires both admiration and disdain in equal measure. From romantic novelists to opera composers, his magnetism has proven irresistible. During his relatively short life, he completely transformed Egypt, yet his sweeping reforms were swiftly undone after his death. He elevated the divine kingship to unprecedented heights, though he was never initially destined to rule. This is Akhenaten, the so-called heretic king, 1353 to 1336 BC, the most polarizing and mysterious of pharaohs, the architect of a royal revolution. His 17-year rule, followed by a chaotic decade, marks perhaps the most thrilling, unpredictable, dynamic, and peculiar era in Egypt's long history. Central to it all was the king's radical vision. Foremost of Amenhotep III's illustrious reign, the designated successor was Prince Thutmose, his eldest son, named according to royal custom after his grandfather and great-great-grandfather. Very little is recorded about his second son, Prince Amenhotep, as he was originally named, until Prince Thutmose's unexpected death, which thrust the younger brother into the position of crown prince. Thutmose left behind few monuments, aside from a stone sarcophagus he had crafted for his beloved pet cat. In contrast, his brother's resolve would reshape Egypt in just a single generation. The new heir must have personally witnessed his father's extravagant said festivals, experiences that clearly left a profound mark on him. The vivid solar symbolism of these ceremonies seems to have seared itself into the young man's creative mind. While there is no sign of theological radicalism at the start of Amenhotep's rule, any such revolutionary ideas must have been developing beneath the surface. Ascending the throne as Amenhotep IV, he initially fulfilled his duty as a devoted son, completing the decoration of his father's grand entrance at Ipit-Sut. He added his own carvings in the conventional style, depicting himself striking down Egypt's enemies. In Nubia, following in his father's footsteps, he established a new settlement, complete with a temple dedicated to Amenhotep III, king of the gods. Distant rulers also recognized his ascension. From Cyprus, the king of Alatia sent congratulations and a gift of sweet oil to mark his coronation. Everything appeared poised for yet another glorious reign, following the familiar dynastic pattern. Egypt's imperial territories reaffirmed their loyalty as well. One particularly flattering letter arrived from the vassal king of Tyre, overflowing with customary expressions of devotion. "I fall at the feet of the king, my lord, 7 times and 7 times. I am but the dust beneath the sandals of the king, my lord. My lord is the sun who rises over all lands each day." Such declarations seem to ignite new ambitions in Amenhotep IV. Within a year of his accession, he revealed his true intentions by launching a building campaign that rivaled his father's grandeur. The sandstone quarries at Gebel el-Silsila were pushed to their limits, worked by unprecedented numbers of conscripted laborers recruited through a nationwide call to service. Monumental structures adorned with royal statues were nothing unfamiliar to Thebes, which had grown accustomed to grandiose constructions during the later years of Amenhotep III's reign. Yet Amenhotep IV's vision diverged significantly. His projects would be concentrated at a single location, the temple complex of Ipit-Sut. Instead, he chose a vacant mudflat beyond the eastern wall, directly facing the rising sun. This carefully selected site lay outside the domain of Amenhotep III, signaling a deliberate break with tradition. Amenhotep IV's 8 new temples at Ipit-Sut were not dedicated to Ammonius, but to the Aten, the visible solar disk, whose imagery his father had previously embraced during his first jubilee. The most ambitious of these new structures was the temple named Gempetin. The Aten is found, rivaling any project Thebes had seen in the previous reign. Its centerpiece was a vast open court encircled by a colonnade. Towering 20-foot statues of Amenhotep IV and his wife, Nefertiti, stood before the columns. Their distinctive crowns marked their divine affiliations. The king wore either the double crown or a twin-plumed headdress, while Nefertiti's flat-top crown identified them with the primeval creator gods Adam, Shu, and Tefnut from the ancient Yuna myth. While Amenhotep III had emphasized his role as the sustaining force of the cosmos, his sons sought association with the very act of creation itself. This theological radicalism was strikingly reflected in the king's statues. To express his unity with the creator and embody both masculine and feminine aspects, while simultaneously distinguishing himself from ordinary humanity, Amenhotep IV instructed his sculptors to adopt a radically new artistic style. His statues featured intentionally exaggerated forms, elongated skulls, sharp and stretched facial features including narrow eyes, a long nose, and a prominent chin. A sinewy neck with pronounced collarbones above a narrow chest that contrasted with a swollen belly and wide hips, plump thighs tapering to slender calves. The result was both unsettling and surreal. Adding another layer of innovation, plaques bearing a pair of royal names were placed at key points on the statues. Yet instead of identifying Amenhotep IV, these inscriptions proclaimed the newly devised titulary of the Aten, his favored deity. Under Amenhotep III, the king had been likened to the solar orb. Under his son, the solar orb had, in effect, become king. Amenhotep IV was proclaiming nothing less than a dual rule, a co-sovereignty shared between himself and the Aten. The abundant reliefs adorning the Gemphiten reinforced this new religious order. The royal family was consistently depicted in the presence of the Aten, no longer shown in the traditional form of a falcon-headed god, but rather as a radiant solar disk, its rays terminating in human hands that gently touched and sustained the royal figures. The ultimate aim of Amenhotep IV's entire building project at Gemphiten was to create a magnificent architectural stage for the celebration of a royal jubilee. In the third year of his reign, Amenhotep IV held his own said festival, maintaining the same schedule established by his father. Through this act, he clearly conveyed that his father's reign had, in a sense, never truly ended. The inscription stressed that this said festival was not primarily for the king himself, but for the Aten. This represented a bold yet natural progression of Amenhotep III's religious doctrine. The deceased king had become the sun itself, destined to reign eternally, with repeated jubilees performed on his behalf by his son. The said festival at Ipit was therefore not a conclusion, but the inauguration of a new age. The sun god and king would now rule together, recreating the world with each new day. These jubilee festivities also pointed towards a dramatic transformation in Egyptian religious life. Traditional processions of the gods were abandoned. In their place, the king and his family became the central focus of devotion. Each day, they traveled in ceremonial procession from palace to temple and back again, with cheering crowds and assembled dignitaries lining the route in reverence. A year after the said festival at Gemphiten, Amenhotep IV solidified his religious revolution by changing his own name. While many rulers had altered their throne names to reflect new directions, it was extremely rare, if not entirely without precedent, for a king to change his birth name. Through the transformative power of the Jubilee, Amenhotep IV believed he had been spiritually reborn as the co-regent of the Aten. No longer bearing the name Amenhotep, meaning Ammonius is content, he adopted a new identity, Akhenaten, effective for the Aten. Such an overt rejection of the Ammonius cult must have sat uneasily alongside the king's continued presence in Thebes, the very heart of Ammonius worship. While the Gemphiten and the other Aten temples were built outside the sacred enclosure of Ipit, the towering monuments dedicated to Ammonius on both sides of the Nile still dominated the landscape, serving as constant reminders of his overwhelming supremacy over all other deities. If the Aten was to be elevated above all others, he required not just temples, but an entirely new domain. Thus began the search for a new royal capital. Akhenaten's choice of location was nothing short of extraordinary. He even claimed that it was the Aten who guided him there. In Middle Egypt, roughly halfway between Thebes and the long-established administrative center of Memphis, lay a wide desert bay where the limestone cliffs on the east bank of the Nile receded, creating a natural amphitheater around 7 miles long and 3 miles wide. The site was remote, easily defensible, and conveniently located opposite a broad, fertile floodplain. Most significantly, it was untouched. Even the natural landscape seemed made for his vision. The shape of the eastern cliffs resembled the hieroglyph for horizon, the place where the sun rises to renew life each day. It was fittingly named Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, a perfect setting for Akhenaten's utopian project. In the late spring of his 5th regnal year, 1349 BC, the king made his first official visit to the site, appearing before his courtiers in a golden chariot gleaming like the sun. There, after a grand open-air offering to the Aten before the cliffs, he formally proclaimed the establishment of his new city, dedicating it to his god for eternity as his monument, with an eternal and everlasting name. Not even Queen Nefertiti could sway his determination, as he firmly declared, "Nor shall the king's great wife say to me, 'Look, there's a good place for Akhenaten elsewhere,' nor shall I listen to her." The king also decreed that the city would contain grand structures for the worship of the Aten and for the exaltation of the royal family. Akhenaten, not Thebes, would become his eternal resting place. "If I die in any town of the north, the south, the west, or the East in these millions of years. Let me be brought back so that I may be buried in Akhenaten. The entire ceremony, along with the king's declaration, was inscribed on 3 immense, steely carved into the cliffs at the northern and southern edges of the site, adorned with statues of the king and queen to commemorate the moment. Exactly 1 year later, Akhenaten returned to survey the city's progress. After spending the night in a richly carpeted tent named Aten is Content, he once again rode out at sunrise in his gilded chariot, made another offering to the Aten, and took a solemn oath, in the name of the Aten and the lives of his wife and daughters, that everything within Akhenaten would belong solely to the Aten for all eternity. This second decree, which more precisely defined the city's boundaries, was carved onto an additional set of 13 boundary markers positioned on both sides of the Nile. The pace of construction accelerated rapidly. Massive amounts of stone were extracted from a vast quarry cut into the northern cliffs. Builders used standardized stone blocks small enough for a single worker to handle, which allowed for swift progress. After 2 years of intense activity, the new city was ready to receive the royal family as their permanent home. As Akhenaten had envisioned, the horizon of the Aten was meticulously designed to highlight its major public buildings. These key structures were connected by the royal road, which ran parallel to the Nile, forming the ceremonial spine of the capital. Each day, the king's chariot journey from his royal residence to the seat of government and back deliberately echoed the Aten's daily passage across the sky, symbolizing the intimate relationship between the heavenly and earthly co-regents. This daily procession also provided the city and its inhabitants with a consistent ritual focus, replacing the traditional religious festivals that the king's new theology had effectively abolished. The primary royal residence was situated at the northernmost edge of Akhenaten, nestled between the cliffs and the river. Within its fortified walls stood the palace itself, supported by extensive barracks housing the royal guards. Nearby were a large administrative building and an array of grand mansions reserved for the king's most trusted advisors. Each morning, as the king proceeded southward in his chariot, his route first carried him past a separate palace dedicated to the royal harem. Lavishly adorned with painted murals and gilded stonework, this residence offered a serene and luxurious retreat. Its central courtyard featured exquisitely maintained gardens, irrigated by an advanced system drawing water from the Nile. Stalls housing cattle and domesticated antelope ensured a steady supply of fine meats for the palace's daily feasts. Beyond this royal compound lay the heart of the city itself. One can imagine the king's cavalcade quickening its pace as it passed by the homes of ordinary citizens. To the east of the royal road sprawled the northern suburb, one of Akhenaten's 2 primary residential districts. While the city's public buildings reflected careful urban planning, the same could not be said for the layout of its neighborhoods. The houses of the populace were clustered in a haphazard fashion, with large villas belonging to prosperous merchants surrounded by smaller dwellings for their servants and dependents. A labyrinth of narrow streets and winding alleys contributed to the village-like atmosphere. These neighborhoods buzzed with activity, constantly evolving as new homes were constructed and the city expanded. Continuing south along the royal road, the king's chariot procession finally entered the central city, the religious and administrative core of Akhenaten. The most imposing structure was the House of the Aten, the god's principal sanctuary, with a street frontage stretching 750 feet and extending nearly half a mile deep. Beyond its 2 colossal entrance towers lay enormous open courtyards filled with mud brick altars. During festivals, these altars would be piled high with offerings of fruit, vegetables, meat, and poultry, presented for the Aten's consumption as he passed overhead in the sky. The temple complex included large-scale food production facilities and a dedicated slaughterhouse to ensure a constant supply for the offerings. Adjacent to the temple stood the king's house, Akhenaten's governmental headquarters, where the day-to-day affairs of the state were managed. One of its most notable features was a balcony, used for public appearances by the royal family. A covered bridge extended over the royal road, connecting the king's house to the great palace. primarily used for grand state receptions and royal ceremonies. The Great Palace also housed administrative offices and accommodations for the royal household. Its centerpiece was a vast open courtyard lined with towering statues of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, intended to impress foreign dignitaries and envoys. The atmosphere of awe and intimidation was heightened by the palace's unique floor decoration. The pathway most often used by the king was covered with plastered images of foreigners, allowing Akhenaten to symbolically trample his enemies as he conducted his affairs. The final major building in the central city was the Mansion of Akhenaten, a smaller temple intended for the royal family's private, daily worship. Aligned with the cleft in the eastern cliffs that led to the royal tomb, it may have functioned as a substitute for a traditional mortuary temple. Like the House of Akhenaten, its design was characterized by vast, open courts, ideal for worshiping the visible sun. Rather than enclosed chambers, a series of ramps, steps, and balustrades structured the sacred space, reflecting the new religious vision. Akhenaten's revolutionary theology had given rise to an equally revolutionary architectural style. Further south, another residential suburb emerged, this one inhabited primarily by common workers and lying beyond the areas typically visited by the king. Yet even here, Akhenaten's presence was inescapable. On the outskirts of the city stood 5 large ritual complexes, each dedicated to an important female member of the royal family. These monuments ensured that wherever the city's residents turned, the royal family's influence remained both highly visible and deeply entrenched. In his new sun city, Akhenaten was not only all-powerful but ever-present.